Hi, this is Tahir Benjalun's The Sand Child. If you're following along in your book, we're on page 112. This is chapter 15, Amar. On that day, some clouds had gathered in the sky, forming an almost perfect circle, and were slowly being washed by a color somewhere between mauve and red. A light mist still hung over the city. People were strolling up and down the great avenues with no particular purpose in mind. Some had sat down in the cafe. They were talking, not about anything of great importance, just the small things of everyday life. They were watching the girls go by. Some made vulgar comments about one woman's walk or about the low-slung backside of another. Others were reading or rereading a newspaper. From time to time they mentioned the spread of male prostitution in the city. They pointed their fingers at a European tourist flanked by two handsome boys. People like to talk about others. Here they love sexual gossip. They spread it all the time. Among those who were making fun of an English homosexual a little while ago, I know some who would be quite willing to make love with him. They find it easier to do than to talk or write about. Books that deal with prostitution in the country are forbidden, but nothing is done to give work to the girls who arrive from the country, nor is anything done about their pimps. So people talk about it in the cafes. They let their imagination loose on the sights that cross the boulevard. In the evening they watch an interminable Egyptian soap opera on television. The Call of Love depicts men and women loving one another, hating one another, tearing one another apart, and never touching one another. I tell you, my friends, we live in a hypocritical society. I don't have to say any more. You know very well how corruption has done its work and is still, slowly but surely, undermining our bodies and souls. I am very fond of the Arabic word for corruption. It is applied to materials that lose their substance and virtue, like wood, for example, which retains its outer surface appearance but is hollow. There is nothing inside. It is undermined from within. Tiny insects have nibbled away at everything under the bark. My friends, do not jostle me violently. I am only an empty carcass. Inside there are still a heart and lungs that continue to do their work. They are more indignant than tired, and I am lost. Yesterday, after the story that Salem brought us, or Salem, this is not spelled in the Moroccan way, so I'm not really sure how that's supposed to be pronounced. I went to the mosque, not to pray, but to try to understand what is happening to us. Imagine, I was woken several times by individuals, some sort of night watchman. I suppose they searched me and checked my identity. I wanted to say to them, the Islam that I carry inside me cannot be found. I am a man who has lived alone, and religion does not really interest me. But if I talked about Ibn Arabi or Al-Hallaj, I would certainly have got myself into trouble. They would have thought these were political leaders in exile, Muslim brothers wanting to seize power in the country. So I got up and went home. Fortunately, the children weren't there. They must have been all out in the vacant lot, playing in the stones and dust. I thought hard and long about poor Ahmed. I shall not call him Zahra, because he signed his manuscript with a single initial, the letter A. Of course, it might have been Aisha, Amina, Atika, Alia, Asiya, but let's say he meant Ahmed. It is true he left the house and abandoned everything. He was tempted to go along with the circus adventure, but I believe he did something else. The mother and her brutish son, their faces exuding hatred of others and of themselves, were no longer capable of pulling off any of their schemes. They tried to get Ahmed involved in some scheme, but they clearly lacked all credibility, since they were constantly cheating each other and indulging in violent arguments. Anyway, what finally made Ahmed decide to run away was a fight between the mother and son with cold steel about a lost jar in which the old woman had preserved a powdered hyena's brain. She provoked her son to anger, shouting, "Son of a whore, son of a queer, you're not a man. Come and fight. Come and defend the little virility I was kind enough to give you at birth." "If you're a whore," he replied, "I'm only your son, and whores' sons are less rotten than their mothers." "Where did you put the black jar? You made me lose a really big deal here. I'm sure you gave it to that old queen who gives you his ass. You're unworthy son of a great lady." "I don't want to fight, not with you." She threw a dagger at him. It grazed his shoulder. The son began to cry and beg his mother to forgive him. He was really ugly. They were both unbearably ugly, devoid of all dignity. They were not like mother and son, but two monsters who aroused such horror in Ahmed that he took flight, cursing the invisible hand that had brought them together. Still cursing her son, the old woman took chase. She nearly caught Ahmed, but slipped on a wet paving stone, which saved him from the old witch's clutches. Ahmed would never have imagined that such a relationship could exist between a mother and a son. He remembered his own relations with his parents and deeply regretted his harsh behavior toward them, his obdurate silences, and his unreasonable demands. He told himself that he could not master the hate that kept him from his poor mother, or the passionate feelings aroused in him by his father, whom he both admired and feared. He began to detest the cynical sham of the marriage to his poor cousin. All night he wandered through the city. At dawn he went to the cemetery and looked for Fatima's grave. He found it, neglected, stuck between two large gray stones. When he thought of her, it was with remorse, something he had not felt for a long time. It was as if he had come home after a long absence, a difficult journey, or some long illness. As he stood contemplating that grave, the image of Fatima gradually became blurred, her voice inaudible, her cries lost in the wind. His memories were gently crumbling away. Ahmed hated cemeteries. He couldn't understand why they weren't covered up or hidden away. They were unhealthy places. There was no point in preserving the illusion of a present. Even our memory plays us false, makes fun of us to the extent of fabricating memories with people who never existed. He began to doubt whether Fatima had ever existed, and refused to believe that he had come to her grave to pray for her soul. In fact, his perception had been seriously affected by lack of sleep and nervous exhaustion. He left the cemetery as if blown by a sudden gust of wind, or as if someone were pushing him from behind. He did not resist. He walked backward, stumbling over a stone, and found himself laid out in a grave that exactly fitted his body. He found it hard to get up. For a moment he thought of staying there and sleeping. Perhaps death would come and take him in her arms, gently, without regret. He would remain in that position, as if to tame death, to familiarize himself with the dampness of the earth, and thus to become fond of her. But the wind was too strong. He got up. Ahmed left, bitter and sad. His first attempts at seduction were rejected by death, or at least by the wind that conveyed it from one place to another. He told himself that he belonged neither to life nor to death, just as he had lived the first part of his history as neither a man nor a woman. The worst thing was, he no longer knew what kind of a creature he was. No mirror returned his image. They were all dulled. Only darkness, with a few hatchings of light, appeared in mirrors. He knew that his case was hopeless, now that he could no longer even find a face in which he could see himself, eyes that would say to him, "You've changed. You're not the same person as you were yesterday. You have white hairs at your temples. You don't smile anymore. Your eyes are growing dim. You've got snot hanging from your nose. You're finished, done for. You no longer exist. You're a mistake, an absence, a handful of ashes, a few pebbles, shards of glass, a little pile of sand, a hollow tree trunk. Your face is disappearing. Don't try to hold on to it. Let it go. You'll be better off without it. One face less. Let your head drop off, roll along the ground, collect a little dust and a few blades of grass. Let it roll to the other end of your thoughts. Don't worry if it ends up in a circus. It will roll until it no longer feels anything." A charlatan to whom he confided his misfortune offered to get him an Indian mirror. You will see your face and your thoughts. You will see what others do not see when they look at you. It's a mirror for the depths of the soul, for the visible and the invisible. It's a rare device used by the princes of the Orient to unravel riddles. Believe me, my friend, it will save you, for in it you will see the stars that guard the empire of the secret. Who told you? Ahmed replied, that I want to be saved. I'd be happier if I lost my face and its image forever. Already, after a long night of thinking and wandering, I pass my hand over my cheeks and feel nothing. My hand moves over a void. It's a feeling you can't understand, unless you are a great smoker of kif. And even when you have to have even and even then you have to have had trouble with your name and been bothered by having a double. But all that's beyond you. Go away now. All I need is silence and an immense layer of darkness. I don't need a mirror. Anyway, I don't believe in your story. When I was a child, we used to play with those Indian mirrors. We used to start fires with them. He continued to wander around for a long time. His physical and mental state left him like a shadow that passed without arousing the slightest attention. He preferred this indifference because, as he had observed, I am on the path of anonymity and deliverance. One might say that at this stage he had been lost sight of, but nobody was sufficiently interested in him to lose sight of him. What he wanted was to lose sight of himself, once and for all, and not be driven this way and that by the flood of time. I don't know how he survived, whether he ate or not, whether he slept or not. His last observations were extremely vague. He was still in this country, or had he managed to stow away on some cargo ship, setting out for the ends of the earth? I mention this because at one point he speaks of the darkness buffeted by strong waves. I imagine that body, which could no longer be imprisoned in another body, on the high seas, not in one of those sleazy bars where the soul is diluted in bad wine. When he left the house and abandoned the stability of home life, he was ready for any adventure, although he did have a wish to put an end to the whole painful comedy of his life. This is what he wrote at the time. Death has settled many unresolved questions. My parents are no longer there to remind me that I bear a secret. It is time I knew who I am. I know I have a woman's body, even if a slight doubt persists as to appearances. I have a woman's body. That is to say, I have a woman's sexual organs, though they were never used. I am an old maid who doesn't even have the right to share the fears of an old maid. I behave like a man. Or, to be more precise, I have been taught to act and think as one who is naturally superior to women. Everything allows me to do this. Religion, the Quran, society, tradition, the family, the country, and myself. I have small breasts that were repressed from adolescence, but a man's voice. My voice is low, because it might betray me. From now on, I shall no longer speak, or rather, I shall speak with my hand over my mouth, as if I had a toothache. I have a delicate face, but my beard grows. I have benefited from the laws of inheritance that give men privileges over women. I have inherited twice as much as my sisters, but this money no longer interests me. I have left it to them. I would like to leave this house without having the slightest trace of the past follow me. I would like to leave so that I might be born again, to be born at 25 years of age, without parents or family, but with a woman's first name, with a woman's body, rid forever of these lies. I may not live very long. I know that my destiny is to be suddenly interrupted, because more or less in spite of myself I have played at deceiving God and his prophets. Not my father, whose instrument I was, an opportunity for revenge, an attempt to defy a curse. I was aware of acting to some extent. Even now I sometimes imagine that kind of life. What kind of life I would have had if I had been simply an ordinary girl. One girl more, the 8th. Another source of anxiety and misfortune. I believe I would not have been able to live and accept what my sisters and the other girls in this country have to endure. I don't believe I am better than they, but I sense within me such determination, such rebellious strength, that I would probably have upset everything. Ah, how angry I am at myself for not unveiling my identity sooner and smashing the mirrors that kept me away from life. I would have been a woman living alone, deciding quite calmly what to do with my solitude. I mean, a solitude chosen, elected, experienced as a desire for freedom, not a retirement imposed by family and clan. I know that in this country a single woman is doomed to every kind of rejection. In a moral, well-structured society, not only is everyone in his place, but there is absolutely no place for him or her, especially her, who consciously or erroneously betrays the established order. A single woman, unmarried or divorced, an unmarried mother, is someone exposed to every kind of rejection. A child born in the shadow of the law, born of a union that is not recognized, is destined at best for the orphanage, where the bad seeds, the seeds of pleasure, in other words, of infidelity and shame, are reared. A secret prayer will be said that this child should not be one of the 100,000 babies who die each year through lack of proper care, through lack of food, or by God's curse. This child will have no name. It will be a son or a daughter of the streets and of sin, and will have to endure every form of misfortune. Arrangements should be made to have, outside each town, a deep pond into which the bodies of these unwanted babies might be thrown. It could be called the Pond of Deliverance. Mothers could go there, preferably at night, wrap their progeny around a stone that some well-intentioned hand would give them, and with a final sob set the child down. Hidden hands from under the water would drag the child to the bottom and drown it. All this would be done with the full knowledge of the community, but it would be indecent, indeed forbidden, to speak of it, even to mention the subject, however indirectly. My country's violence is also to be found in those closed eyes, in those diverted looks, in those silences, which stem from resignation rather than indifference. Today I am a single woman, an old single woman, now at the age of 25. I consider that my old age has at least half a century to run. 2 lives with 2 perceptions and 2 faces, but the same dreams, the same profound solitude. I don't think I'm innocent. I even think I've become rather dangerous. I no longer have anything to lose, and there is so much in me to repair. I'm suspicious of my capacity for anger and destructive hatred. Nothing can hold me back anymore. I'm just a little afraid of what I might do. I'm afraid because I don't know exactly what I'm going to do, but I've made up my mind to do it. I could, of course, have remained shut up in the cage from which I gave orders and managed the affairs of the family. I could have been content with the status of an invisible, powerful man. I could even have built a still higher room to have a better view of the city. But my life, my nights, my breathing, my desires would have been condemned. Ever since, I have had a strong loathing for the desert island, for the tiny house isolated in the woods. I want to go out, to see people, to breathe the bad smells of this country, as well as the perfumes of its fruits and flowers, to go out, to be jostled, to be in the midst of the crowd, and to feel a man's hands clumsily groping for my buttocks. Many women find this very disagreeable. I can understand them. For me, it would be the first anonymous hand laid on my back or hips. I would not turn around, so that I would not see the face of the man who was touching me. If I saw it, I would probably be horrified. But bad manners or vulgar gestures can sometimes have a touch of poetry about them, just enough not to arouse one's indignation. I now understand why my father did not let me go out. He arranged circumstances to thicken the mystery around my existence. At one point he lost confidence in me. I might have betrayed him, gone out naked, for instance. People would have said, "It's a madwoman." They would have covered me and brought me home. That idea haunted me. But what is the use of causing a scandal? My father was ill, my mother enclosed in her silence. My sisters lived an orderly, ordinary life. After my parents' death, I felt a sense of deliverance, a new freedom. Now nothing held me in that house. I could go out at last, leave, and never come back. I had reached the point of yearning for amnesia, of wanting to burn my memories one after another, or gather them up like a pile of firewood, tie them together with a transparent thread or a spider web, and get rid of them in the marketplace, selling them for a little oblivion, for a little peace and quiet. But that would be too easy a solution. To go out, to walk out, head held back, looking up at the sky to catch the rise of a star at dusk, and to give up thinking, to choose some quiet hour, some secret road, a gentle light, a landscape where loving creatures without a past, without a history, would sit around, as in those Persian miniatures where everything seems marvelous, outside time. Ah, if only I could step over that prickly hedge, that moving wall that keeps just ahead of me and bars my way. If only I could cross it, at the risk of a few scratches, and take my place in the 11th century miniature. Angels' hands would set me down on the precious carpet in silence, without disturbing the old storyteller, a sage who practices love with great delicacy. I see him there, stroking the hips of a young girl, happy to give herself to him without fear, without violence, with love and modesty. So many books have been written about bodies, pleasures, perfumes, tenderness, the sweetness of love between man and woman in Islam. Ancient books that nobody reads nowadays. Where has the spirit of that poetry gone? To go out and forget, to head for places withdrawn from time, and wait. Before, I expected nothing, or rather, my life was governed by my father's strategy. I accumulated things without having to wait. Now I shall have the leisure to wait for anything or anybody. I shall know that waiting may be a ceremony, an enchantment, that I shall make some face or hand emerge out of the distance. I shall stroke it, seated before the horizon with its constantly shifting lines and colors. I shall watch my visitor leave. Thus I will be given the wish to die slowly before that ever-receding sky. That, my friends, is how our character died, before the sky, before the sea, surrounded by images, in the sweetness of the words he was writing, in the tenderness of the thoughts he cherished. I believe he never left his room high up on the terrace of the big house. He let himself die there, surrounded by old Arabic and Persian manuscripts on love, drowned by the call of the desire that he imagined, without ever being visited by anybody. He locked his door during the day. At night he slept on the terrace and conversed with the stars. His body was of little importance to him. He let it waste away. He wanted to conquer time. I think he succeeded in the last stage of his life, when he reached the highest degree of contemplation. I think he knew that ecstatic beatitude one sometimes feels when contemplating a starry sky. He must have had a very gentle death, his eyes resting on that distant horizon. He must have gone over the long ordeal, or at least the error that was his life. What I am going to read to you now is not to be found in the manuscript. It springs from my own imagination. I am going on tiptoe. I don't want to be heavy, in case the angels, as it is said in the Koran, come to carry me off to heaven. I have emptied my body and set fire to my memory. I was born in the midst of fabricated celebrations. I leave in silence. I was, as the poet says, the last and most solitary of human beings, deprived of love and friendship, and in that much inferior to the most imperfect of the animals. I was a mistake, and in life I have known nothing but masks and lies. Amar's narrative was followed by a long silence. Salem and Fatuma looked convinced. They regarded each other but said nothing. Then, after a while, Salem, embarrassed, tried to justify his own version of the story. This character is in himself an act of violence. His destiny, his life are really inconceivable. You can't get out of it by making some psychological pirouette. To put it crudely, you must admit that Ahmed is not one of nature's mistakes, but a social deviation. Anyway, what I mean is, he isn't someone attracted by his own sex. With his desires totally crushed, I think only a great act of violence, a suicide with lots of blood, can bring this story to an appropriate end. You've read too many books, said Amar. That's an intellectual's explanation. But I ask the question, what is there in this unfinished story that is of such interest to us idle, disillusioned folk? You, the son of slaves, have spent your life in study. You'd have liked to know what a free life was like when you were 20. But at 20, your parents were doing their best to spare you the misfortunes they had had to endure. As for me, I am an old retired schoolteacher, tired of this country, or, to be more precise, by those who mistreat and disfigure it. I wonder what I found so interesting in this story. I suppose it was, first of all, in its enigmatic quality. Then, the comment it provides on our society, which is very harsh. I know it doesn't seem that way, but there's such violence in our relationships that a crazy story about a man with a woman's body is a means of carrying that violence to its limit. That's what fascinates us. You, Fatima, you've said nothing. What is your opinion? Yes, I've said nothing, because in this country a woman is used to keeping quiet. If she does speak out, that's an act of violence in itself. I'm old now, which is why I can sit around with you. 30 years ago, or when I was about 30, do you think I would have dared to be seen with you at a cafe? I'm free because I'm old and wrinkled. I'm allowed to speak because nothing I say can be of any importance. The risks are minimal. Yet it still feels odd to be here today, sitting in a cafe, listening to you and talking. We hardly know one another. You know nothing about me. If you remember, it was I who suggested that we come and meet in this cafe after the storyteller's disappearance. It was I who spoke first. You didn't notice. Common enough, you might say. After all, an old woman. But it is not so common as all that. An old woman has to stay at home and look after her grandchildren. I'm neither a mother nor a grandmother. Perhaps I'm the only childless old woman alive. I live alone. I have a little income. I travel. I read. I learned to read at school. I think I was the only girl in the whole school. My father was proud of me. He said, I'm not ashamed of having daughters. Fatima stopped for a moment, shielded her face with part of her headscarf, and lowered her eyes. It was difficult to tell whether she was embarrassed by what she was saying, or by the presence of someone. In fact, she was trying to avoid someone's gaze. A short, rather well-dressed man had stopped in front of the cafe. His eyes moved from Fatima, who kept her head lowered, to the back of the cafe. He walked up to our table and said, Well, Haja, don't you recognize me? We were at Mecca together. I'm Haji Britel, the quick, efficient bird. Amar asked him to leave them alone. The man went off, muttering something like, My memory plays tricks on me, and yet I'm sure it was she. Fatima unveiled her face. This interruption had disturbed her. She remained silent for a while, then, after a deep sigh, said, In life, one should carry two faces. It would be good to have a spare face, or better still, no face at all. We would just be voices, as if we were all blind. Well, my friends, I invite you to come to my place tomorrow, so that we can hear the end of our story. I live in a room at the orphanage. I'll expect you at sundown. Come just before. You'll see how beautiful the sky is from my room.